Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théâtres, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. À fleurs, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goët.
Since more illegal immigrants are rushing the border, more kids are being separated from their parents and temporarily housed in what are essentially summer camps.
I mean, look, I read today about a 10-year-old girl with Down syndrome who was taken from her mother and put in a cage. I read about did you say want to a 10-year-old with Down syndrome being taken from her mother?
What I said is you can pick anything you want, but the bottom line is very clear.
How dare you?
When you cross the border illegally,
these are not, like it or not, these aren't our kids. Show them compassion. But it's not like he's doing this to the people of Idaho or Texas. These are people from another country, and now people are saying that they're more important than people in our country who are paying taxes, who have needs as well.
Michael Hayden posted a picture of Auschwitz. Donnie Deutsch is talking.
That liberal
look,
Michael Hayden. Yeah, that screaming liberal Michael Hayden.
You're out of your cotton-picking mind.
Cotton-picking mind? Brother, let me tell you something. Let me tell you something. I got some relatives who pick cotton.
Welcome back. The debate over immigration policy has gone far past policy and left basic decency behind on its way. Former Arkansas Governor Mike Huckabee is now facing backlash after tweeting out this picture with the caption, "Nancy Pelosi introduces her campaign committee for the take back of the House." And Sarah Huckabee Sanders, the White House press secretary and Mike Huckabee's daughter, was asked to leave a restaurant Friday night in Virginia because of where she works. Sanders tweeted, quote, "Last night I was told by the owner of Red Hen in Lexington, Virginia, to leave because I work for the president, and I politely left." That restaurant has since been inundated with positive and negative Yelp reviews. Meanwhile, White House policy advisor Stephen Miller was reportedly called a fascist earlier this week while dining at a Mexican restaurant here in Washington. Also, Homeland Security Secretary Kirstjen Nielsen also jeered by demonstrators, there you hear them, while she ate out at, again, a Mexican restaurant. So I don't know who wants to take this to start. Shauna Thomas, how about we start with you?
There is a real conversation here about civility, right? And our ability to be in the same spaces at the same time with people who we do not agree with. And the Sarah Sanders example is one of those where was that the right way for the owner of that restaurant to handle the situation of Sarah Sanders eating in that restaurant? Well, it's definitely not going to further the conversation in between Republicans and Democrats for her to do that. However, the counter is, was Sarah Sanders using her White House account, her @press secretary Twitter account, to basically rally the anger against this restaurant in Virginia? Was that a proper use of her function and her title and her job as well? Neither of those things gets us any closer to being people who can actually talk about issues in the same room together. But it does really point to kind of where we are, which is it's an example of how divided we actually are. And it's scary that we're that divided.
I do think that one of the things that's frustrating is, you know, if we want to stop and we want to raise the civility, is people need to stop celebrating, like on the left, they need to stop celebrating people like Robert De Niro when he says what he said at the Tonys. They need to stop celebrating and cheering what people are doing in restaurants. It's outrageous, and it needs to be treated in the same way that people treat what President Trump says that people see as insightful. And so I think we need to have like a balance here somewhere. We need to find it. I don't know how. And someone's got to put a pin in the balloon. I mean, the balloon's about to burst, and it's kind of terrifying out there. It feels like a powder keg.
Right. Well, if we're going to demand, you know, I mean, do unto others, as you would have to to you and anyone on either side of the aisle who may or may not disagree. I mean, the idea would ideally be that we could, at the very least, in our personal treatment of each other, act that out. John Meacham, is this situation, this devolution of our civil discourse, are we destined to just kind of keep going farther and farther down the sewer as this goes on, or is it recoverable? Is civility gone forever?
No, nothing's ever gone forever. It's redeemable. The founders wanted us to seek a more perfect union, not a perfect one. I agree that it's hard to see exactly how this writes itself, but it can, it should, and I think it will. Everybody is in this Hobbesian moment of everything is weaponized. Now, the little red hen or whatever it was is weaponized. The Mexican restaurants are. But if you're on the left, you're thinking, why isn't this appropriate? If I really believe that these people within the administration are ruining America, why can't I take a stand in the best way I know how? So I understand the reaction to it, and I think it's the Trump people. There's a reason they're where they are. They're very good at playing. Suddenly, why can't we all get along after they have relentlessly and really created a culture of bullying at the very highest levels. If anything, this is a reminder that the presidency has an outsized effect on our manners and morals. And sometimes people say we're being sentimental about the presidency, we focus too much on it. But I promise, if Donald Trump had not conducted himself the way he has since he began running for president, even before when he was attacking President Obama and his alleged birth issue, which was not an issue, if Trump had not helped exacerbate the tribal tendencies, his staff wouldn't be facing this kind of backlash. So you reap what you sow.
Far be it for me to disagree with John Meacham, but I don't think they're saying let's all get along. I think they're using this to drive the wedge even further and further, and they're saying they're doing it's all tongue in cheek. I don't think there's anything about this that they're saying, oh my gosh, can't we all be nice to each other in restaurants?
The other piece of this is that it doesn't frighten the White House or Republicans to have these protesters show up. In fact, there's some evidence that part of the reason Donald Trump was able to turn the primaries significantly against Ted Cruz when he was because some of these protests against Trump happened, and Republican voters said, we want to support whoever is getting protested. So especially on the right, especially among the president's base, these kind of protests result in sort of a conservative backlash that the White House likely believes could be politically useful.
It is Wednesday, the 27th of June of 2018, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam, and our daily special is Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. Will no one rid me of this priest? Well, on the other hand, it may be the religious types, the true religious types, mind you, who save us from this morass of evil. And I never thought I'd say that and actually hope for it. But there you are. And it's not just the priests that are going to be helping out, but maybe a few cardinals and bishops too, and maybe some brethren from the wide spectrum of religious belief. Though, those who believe that the poor should be helped, the infirm should be cared for, and everybody should be equal in their pursuits for life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. All right. Well, the D.C. press corps just doesn't want cocktail hour upset. I mean, come on. They work so hard all day, every day, and they get a little bit of time to themselves when they can get a little bit of repast and maybe imbibe just a little and a little bit more and a little bit more, and they don't want any interruptions. Don't you know that you are supposed to show proper civility towards your betters? And they can't stand it. And, David mentioned at the top of his show that Fox News camped out in front of Red Hen and incited a riot. But that's what a propaganda outfit does. They're right on it. They know a spectacle when they see it, and, well, how to, get a proper share. in the marketplace of ideas. Oh, my God. Well, what's on the rest of the menu? Because, we had court cases. I guess, you can't have any Japanese internment camps, but all other internment camps are okay, just not Japanese. All right. Well, good. I like that. Now we can just have internment camps for everybody. You were born here. Your ancestors were here since before the revolution. Well, you came from somewhere else, and you're going to get deported because you can't prove you're an American citizen because, the marketplace of ideas. Goodbye. Thank you, John Roberts. Thank you, Gorsuch. Thank you. Oh, McConnell's wife defended him. Leave my husband alone. Leave my husband alone. He's an evil little effer, and so are you, Elaine Chao. Boy. Did you see McConnell's house? That's on a senator's salary, and that ain't that much. But Elaine Chao's family has a lot of money. Yeah, number 1, number 2 shipping magnate in the world. No wonder she's transportation secretary. Well, on the rest of the menu. In the Bistro Cafe, part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. With fresh revelations and shifting answers, Federal Election Commission complaints about the NRA's Russian ties keep piling up. The Supreme Court rules abortion providers who are forced to have a room closet every 12 feet and an ER room fully staffed have less First Amendment rights than abortion opponents who want to lie about established science and practice medicine without a license. It's a new world, isn't it? And it makes America great again. Ooh, I guess. And the senior DOJ official responsible for training immigration judges says 3- and 4-year-olds can represent themselves in court. This is the guy training the immigration judges. 3- and 4-year-olds. They can represent themselves in court because he can teach them. Okay, I don't know. It sounds like an Onion article, but it's not. None of this is anymore. It's so scary. Well, after the break, we then move to the chef's table where Greece Prime Minister Alexis Tsipras tells Britain he wants the Parthenon Marbles back. You know, the ones that were spirited away during the Ottoman Empire for safekeeping? Well, it's okay to bring them back. We're safe. And Syria and Russia break their ceasefire, sending 50,000 civilians running toward the Jordanian border. Unfortunately, that border remains sealed. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. To the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, you'll notice to the rightish of the page the chat room link, and that is monitored by our roaring girl Kelly Lincoln. And to the leftish of the page are the contribute donate buttons, and those are integral parts to this operation because we truly and sincerely are unable to do this without you. And so thank you for your generosity. Follow Netroots Radio on Twitter at Netroots Radio. Tom takes care of that. You could also check us out on Facebook. I'm supposed to take care of it, but as I keep telling you, Facebook takes care of itself. Doesn't it now? Always. It will always just take care of itself. And let's see. Follow me on Twitter at Justice Putnam. Follow West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy on Twitter at Cookbook West. And I do post show notes and links on my diary on Daily Co's. And you can find me on Daily Co's as Justice Putnam. All one word. That's how we used to do it back in the day. Okay, and I didn't make up the name, and I didn't want to make up a name. Well, I did. I have a porn star type name for certain kinds of writings. Yep. You want to know what it is? It's Jerry Bronco, short for Gerechtkeit Imbronciato. Okay? Because, when you come into the States, they got to give you an Americanized name, and Gerechtkeit Imbronciato it doesn't fly here. Jerry Bronco? Oh, there you go. Okay, you got the backstory on that one. Okay, well, let's get into some serious business here, because we did report on a couple of these revelations last week or the week before that are mentioned in this article by Casey Michelle from Think Progress. And but now a new complaint that's been filed with the FEC urges the commission to investigate a string of revelations regarding the NRA's ties to sanctioned Russian officials, as well as the gun lobby's shifting answers about just how much money it received from Russian nationals. Because the Russian nationals couldn't always buy, overpriced condos and small Florida estates for, I don't know, 10s, 20s, hundreds of millions over asking. You can't keep doing that. You got to spread it around. That's called diversifying your portfolio. Jeez. Well, the complaint submitted last week by the American Democracy Legal Fund supplements the ADLF's initial January filing, which sparked a preliminary FEC investigation into the NRA's strange ties to Russians that have been sanctioned by the U.S. Sanctions, laws. We don't need no laws. We got the guns. And you know what? They do. And I think that's what needs to be mentioned about this debate of civility, because what liberals are being warned about is that you can have armed people at Obama meetings, which they did, okay? But just remember, there's armed people that can come after you too. So do you really, really want to be uncivil? Look what will happen. Look what is happening to Red Hen right now. An absolute abuse of power by Sarah Sanders and her cronies, the cadre of ghouls, as I call them. Okay. I know it's when cocktail hour comes, they don't want to have to talk about serious stuff. I mean, they've been working hard all day. Pretty soon they're going to go on another 2, 3, 4, 5, 8-week vacation so that they can go home and avoid their constituents as much as possible. Well, back to this story. The new filing details reports about previously undisclosed trips and meetings, including sit-downs between NRA officials and those connected directly to the Kremlin, and raises fresh questions about how the NRA managed to donate over $30 million to the Trump campaign without disclosing its donors. Citizens United. David Bossie, the guy that is supposedly on suspension for telling a black Democratic analyst that he was out of his cotton-picking mind. Yeah, he'll be back, and he won't be contrite about it at all. David Bossie, he's the one that pushed the Citizens United movie, and, what was Citizens United? A hit job on Hillary Clinton that they wanted to dump in the media during a time that by FEC regs you couldn't do that. And they don't, so collusion with the Russians, they don't care at this point. They want what they want, and sometimes strange bedfellows. Oh, my God. It also points to statements from the Senate Judiciary Committee, which noted that it had obtained a number of documents that suggest the Kremlin used the NRA as a means of accessing and assisting Mr. Trump in his campaign. Which, Mueller's stepping up the pace of his investigation. And that's why we're, a lot of anger and raging by Trump and several of his cadre of ghouls have ramped up recently because they know. It's somewhat stunning that a group that is about protecting people's right to bear arms and protecting, as they would say, a central part of our Constitution and Bill of Rights, a well-regulated militia to protect everybody's rights, is basically taking money from foreign sources which have connections to an adversarial foreign government, and that was from the ADLF's Brad Woodhouse. While the complaint doesn't detail any new information, it provides an overview of revelations about the NRA's relationship with Russia since the initial January filing. It only highlights It only highlights the web of contacts Russian officials and proxies maintained with NRA higher-ups, including meetings in Moscow in late 2015. But it also details recent disclosures about the NRA's ties with Alexander Torshin, a sanctioned Russian official who barely escaped arrest in Spain on charges of massive money laundering and links to organized crime. This is where we are. It's all about organized crime. Because organized crime have nation-state status in Russia and elsewhere. And we need to wrap our heads around that. As the latest filing is only a supplemental complaint, it will likely not trigger a new FEC investigation. But while the status of the initial preliminary investigation remains unclear, the NRA has remained notably mum on the topic. What I think speaks volumes about this is how little the NRA has had to say, Woodhouse said. They have been uncharacteristically quiet on this. Well, of course. They're all comrades, you know. Millhiser of Think Progress penned this next offering here at the Bistro Cafe, part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Now, one of the centerpieces of the Supreme Court's First Amendment decisions is that the Constitution does not permit viewpoint discrimination. The government may, in certain limited cases, enact laws that place restrictions on speech, but discriminating between two opposing sides of a debate is a big no-no. Well, yesterday, the Supreme Court created an except when we do it carve-out to the rule. When you boil down the opinion's rhetoric, the holding of National Institute of Family and Life Advocates versus Becerra is that abortion opponents enjoy the full force of a robust First Amendment, while abortion providers must accept a watered-down right to free speech. Justice Clarence Thomas wrote the majority opinion on behalf of his fellow Republicans. All four of the court's Democratic appointees dissented. Now, the lawsuit involves a California law targeting crisis pregnancy centers, anti-abortion groups that often try to actively deceive pregnant individuals in order to prevent them from having an abortion. As the state legislator explained when it enacted the law, the heart of the case is that these crisis pregnancy centers pose as full-service women's health clinics, but aim to discourage and prevent women from seeking abortions in order to fulfill their goal of interfering with women's ability to be fully informed and exercise their reproductive rights. And the men of the Republican majority, which they all are, men, white men, except for Clarence, but you know what I mean. They are perfectly... Now, what was that again? Interfering with women's ability to be fully informed and exercise their reproductive rights? Well, yeah, they're all in on that. That's what they've been working for. That's what they were trained in the Federalist Society. They worked so hard in the farm clubs, and they're at the pinnacle of their profession now. They are where they are supposed to be. In many ways, this law is a mirror image of similar laws enacted by anti-abortion state legislators, which require genuine abortion clinics to communicate a state-sponsored message to people seeking abortions. Under Planned Parenthood v. Casey, the state may require abortion providers to obtain informed consent from the patients before they perform the procedure. The specific law at issue in Casey required abortion providers to tell their patients the nature of the procedure, the health risks of the abortion and childbirth, and probable gestational age of the unborn child, and to notify them of the availability of printed materials from the state, which provided information about the child and various forms of assistance. But the crisis pregnancy clinics can actually lie and say that they are a fully serviced clinic, with doctors on board, by the way. Well, in fairness to Thomas, the case does not slam the door entirely on a more narrowly tailored law that would have similar effect on CPCs. California might, for example, pass a law requiring all clinics that purport to offer reproductive health services to disclose whether or not they provide abortive and contraceptive care. But even this hypothetical law may have a steep hill to climb after this case now, in striking down the disclosure requirements that California imposed on unlicensed clinics. Thomas claims that our precedents require disclosures to remedy a harm that is potentially real and not purely hypothetical, and that California has not demonstrated any justification for the unlicensed notice that is more than purely hypothetical. The only justification the California legislature put forward was ensuring that pregnant women in California know when they are getting medical care from licensed professionals. Thomas writes, but California points to nothing suggesting that pregnant women do not already know that the covered facilities are staffed by unlicensed medical professionals. In order to pass a law informing patients that they may be entering a sham clinic, in other words, Millhiser says here, California may first have to produce data showing that patients do not already know that they are entering sham clinics. And the weight of any data California does produce will be weighed by a judiciary that just held that abortion providers have weaker First Amendment rights than abortion opponents. Of Alternate brings us this last offering here at the Bistro Cafe, part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. Yeah. Well, a senior Justice Department official and longtime immigration judge said in sworn testimony he has helped 3- and 4-year-olds become well-versed enough in immigration law to represent themselves in court. And this is reported by the Washington Post, by the way. Jake Vial, who the Post notes is responsible for training other judges, made the claim during a deposition in federal court, according to a transcript of the court case. His testimony came as part of a lawsuit by the ACLU asking the government to provide attorneys for children who cannot afford a lawyer in immigration proceedings, and he is an expert witness for, the government, Trump's government. I've taught immigration law literally to 3- and 4-year-olds, Weil said. It takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of patience. They get it. It's not the most efficient, but it can be done. You idiot. Weil later repeated he has trained 3- and 4-year-olds in immigration law. You could do a fair hearing. It's going to take you a lot of time, though. Oh, God. You mean like coaching them what to say? Okay, all right. You just signed your life away. Maybe you can work as an indentured servant. As God planned. I think this is where we're at. A witness for the plaintiffs, which included the ACLU, the American Immigration Council, the Northwest Immigrant Rights Project, and several law firms said Weil's testimony was preposterous. I nearly fell off my chair when I read that deposition. Temple University psychology Lawrence Sternberg said 3 and 4-year-olds do not yet have logical reasoning abilities. It's preposterous, frankly, to think they could be taught enough about immigration law to be able to represent themselves in court. Elian Arulan Anthem, Deputy Legal Director of the ACLU of Southern California, questioned Weil in the deposition. He said Weil's comments are going to be a significant issue in the case. This is the person in charge of training immigration judges about how to treat children, he asked. And this is the witness the government puts forward to present their views as to how this is supposed to happen. That is horrifying. In a statement to the Post, Weil said his sworn testimony doesn't present an accurate assessment of my views on the topic and were taken out of context. That's what they always say. All right. Well, we're going to look into that a little bit more. 3 and 4-year-olds representing themselves in court. What could go wrong? Let's get to our break. We'll come back, of course, and go through weather from around the world and finish with the stories that we've curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Take Two Movie Review. I'm Kim Lowe. This week, Ocean's Gone Girl. The new Ocean's 8 isn't so much a reboot of the highly successful franchise. It's more like a continuation of it in female hands, with the protagonist being Danny Ocean's younger sister Debbie. In an opening scene that mimics Clooney's from Ocean's 11, a crocodile-tearful Debbie reveals during a parole hearing that Danny is dead and all she wants is a regular job and a simple life. However, since she's an Ocean, we know that isn't going to happen. Cut to the next few scenes and we watch the newly released Debbie walking off with several $100s worth of beauty items from a department store and conning her way into a luxury hotel room. It turns out that while serving a 5-year sentence, she's come up with a plan to steal a $150 million necklace during New York's annual Met Gala ball. Of course, carrying out such a task requires lots of planning and a professional team, so Debbie sets about recruiting only the best, including characters played by Cate Blanchett, Sarah Paulson, Mindy Kaling, and Helena Bonham Carter. The plan is not as out there as that of Ocean's 11, but it is intriguing, as is the clever revenge subplot targeting the person that landed Debbie in jail. There are also some fun cameos, including Heidi Klum and legendary Vogue editor Anna Wintour. The cast here is A-list to be sure, but not unlike in other celebrity vehicles like this, many are underused, such as Sarah Paulson's thief-turned-soccer mom, and even the usually dynamic Cate Blanchett. However, newcomers to the screen, Rihanna and Asian-American rapper Aquafina, shine, and Anne Hathaway is great as the parody of the spoiled actress who may or may not be in on the heist. Ocean's 8 may not be in a class with the original, but it is some summer fun. This has been Take Two Movie Review. I'm Kim Lowe. Catch up with us at TakeTwoMovieReview.com and feed us back on our page on YouTube.
This is Scientific American's 60-Second Science. I'm Christopher Intagliata. Musicians are said to have better language skills, and scientific studies have backed that up. But it's not clear why that might be the case. Now a study of 74 Chinese kindergartners suggests 6 months of piano lessons can heighten the brain's response to changes in pitch. And kids who got piano lessons were also better at telling apart two similar-sounding Mandarin words, which contain different consonants, than were students who got extra reading training or who just went through regular kindergarten. The results are in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences. Mandarin is a tonal language, the famous example being the word ma, which can mean mother or horse depending on its pitch. So might musical training translate better to Mandarin than it would to English?
Yeah, it's possible to influence the results.
Robert DeSimone, a neuroscientist at the McGovern Institute at MIT. But he says other studies do back up the fact that music lessons benefit language learners, even in countries without tonal languages.
And what our study added on top of that was also some idea of the neural basis for those benefits.
And if you don't own a piano, don't despair. The reading group actually did just as good on many measures as the piano group.
Reading's pretty good, actually. We don't mean to downplay reading instruction.
More important, he says, was to show piano wasn't actually worse than reading for these skills, perhaps encouraging cash-strapped schools to keep their music programs alive. Thanks for listening. For Scientific American's 60-Second Science, I'm Christopher Intagliata.
This program is presented by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
Pools, water parks, and other recreational water venues are popular places to relax and stay cool, but they can be sources of serious illness. Since 2000, nearly 500 outbreaks have been reported at recreational water venues in the U.S., resulting in over 27,000 illnesses and 8 deaths. Most were caused by parasites, bacteria, viruses, or certain chemicals in the water. Parents with young children who have diarrhea should not allow their children to swim or play in the water. In addition, bathers should check the inspection scores of pools and water parks and can conduct mini inspections using test strips before getting in the water. A few simple precautions can allow you to share the fun, not the germs. Thank you for joining us on A Minute of Health with CDC.
For the most accurate health information, visit cdc.gov or call 1-800-CDC-INFO.
You can help stop the Trump agenda in its tracks. Make sure you're registered to vote. Go to rockthevote.org. And on November 6th, vote for Democrats up and down the ticket. This message, a public service from all the fine people of netrootsradio.com.
Welcome to 60 Second Civics, the daily podcast of the Center for Civic Education. I'm Mark Gage. The 13th Amendment, ratified in December 1865, outlawed slavery or involuntary servitude throughout the United States and its territories, thereby finishing the work begun by President Abraham Lincoln's Emancipation Proclamation of 1862-63. The Emancipation Proclamation abolished slavery in the states that were members of the Confederacy, but not elsewhere. The 13th Amendment said nothing about citizenship and equal civil rights for the former slaves, especially their right to vote. These matters were later taken up by the 14th Amendment in 1868 and the 15th Amendment in 1870. The 14th Amendment granted full citizenship to African Americans. The 15th Amendment guaranteed the right to vote to men regardless of their race, color, or previous condition of servitude. That's all for today's podcast. 60 Second Civics, where civic education only takes a minute.
This is Solidarity News on Radio Labour.
This is a Radio Labour report recorded on June 27th, 2018. I'm Mark Belanger. Grenada is a small island in the Caribbean with about 100,000 people. It has a robust labor movement representing the island's working people. To find out more about Grenada, I talked to Andre Lewis. Mr. Lewis is the President General of the Grenada Technical and Allied Workers Union. He is also President of the Grenada Trade Union Council and a member of the country's Senate. I asked him to describe some of the major issues facing his members.
Some of the most important issues facing our members in Grenada today has to do with the issue of unemployment. That's a major concern for us. As we continue to recover, even based on the information from the World Bank and the IMF, one of the major concerns is that these economic benefits are not felt at the level of the ordinary workers, the general public. The issue of job tenure is another very important factor for us. We have a case here where we have seen, especially in the private sector, let me just say, the question of contract work been used as one of the new norm these days. So you can have people doing permanent jobs and are still considered to be on contract, and that their years of service are not counted as being continuous. That has serious implications for the upward mobility of the workers, because the financial institutions and others will not, and I want to repeat, will not go into any long-term arrangement with any worker who does not have any tenure of service. The question of the transportation cost, we will say that about 1/3 of the income of a worker is spent on transport, just transport alone. And that is of significant concern. The aspect also of minimum wage. The last minimum wage was addressed in 2011-2012. And as we will all know, given the cost of living implications and impact on our members, it therefore means that persons are finding it more and more difficult to meet some of their basic needs. Significant importance also has to do with our healthcare system. Our healthcare system leaves a lot to be desired, and it is extremely difficult and challenging for most of our members. And therefore, we have made a call on the government to give this number one priority going forward. So these are some of the major issues confronting our members today and the workers in general.
I know that climate change is seriously affecting many small island states. Is that also true for Grenada?
Well, we are extremely concerned about climate change, its impact on, some people may say, the different temperatures, etc. And as such, we are very much interested in supporting and getting involved in any activities that will result in the management of the negative impact on our environment, our climate, and the labor movement is prepared and has given its support to any of these activities that will contribute to more positive impact on the environment. So, as it relates to plastics, for instance, we will support and has been calling for more care to be taken in terms of the amount of plastics that have been brought into our country and to work towards the eventual elimination of things as plastics, etc., from our environment. Also, we are concerned that given the fact that we are very much of a consumer society, quite a number of the products that comes into our country are not at the level of the standard that one will find in what is considered to be the industrialized world. We have been involved in importing into our country a number of second-hand or used vehicles, used products, for instance, tires, etc. And given the size of our island, we are running into a problem with the question of solid waste disposal. So we are very much concerned about matters like this.
And that's it. International labor news you can use. I'm Mark Boulanger. Thank you for listening. And remember, it's all about global solidarity.
From UN headquarters in New York, I'm Luke Vargas with your World in 2 minutes. A new case of polio, the infectious disease that can lead to paralysis in children, has emerged on the Pacific island of Papua New Guinea, a country that previously declared itself polio-free. The new case is vaccine-derived, meaning a child that had been given an oral polio vaccine likely spread the disease through fecal matter and into contaminated drinking water to another child. That method of infection has been long documented but is exceedingly rare. By the World Health Organization's own count, of the 10 billion doses of poliovirus administered since the year 2000, just 760 children have been diagnosed with vaccine-derived polio.
What is happening in PNG is that you have pockets of population which are not well vaccinated, and therefore the use of the oral polio vaccine, although it's a very rare emergence, can, in some cases, result in vaccine-derived poliovirus paralysis.
That's Michel Zafran, the WHO's director for polio eradication.
It should not be difficult to interrupt this outbreak if we carry out rapidly a good quality vaccination campaign.
Zafran and the WHO speak from experience. Since UN member states set out to eradicate polio in the 1980s, the disease has been almost entirely stamped out.
When we started the eradication effort back in 1988, there were 350,000 cases of paralytic polio every year in 125 countries that were endemic for this polio virus. We now are down to actually 3 endemic countries. Nigeria hasn't had a single case since August 2016. And the 2 that have had cases this year are Pakistan and Afghanistan. We've had a total of 11 cases so far.
There is still no cure for polio, but vaccines first rolled out in the 1950s are credited with preventing hundreds of millions of new infections. Luke Vargas, The United Nations.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Smothered Benedict Wednesdays, folks. Well, weather here along the banks of the Rogue River and the Rogue River Valley of southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States is going to be nearly the same as yesterday. We had a high of 85. Currently, we are about 58 degrees, and as I mentioned, we'll have a high of about 85 or maybe a tad higher here at where the mothership is at positively 3rd and Marie. Tonight we'll have a low of in the mid-50s again, and then maybe a little cooler tomorrow with a high topping up, maybe 84. Yeah. Though we still have a projected temperature for the weekend, which is when we have our big event here in Rogue River it's called the Rooster Crow Parade, and they have a rooster crowing contest where people bring their roosters to crow, and then human beings crow like roosters for another competition. There's barbecue to be had and all sorts of fun things. And so last year it was over 100. It was just ungodly hot. And it looks like it might be upper 80s, low 90s, and I'm hoping maybe not that hot. It would be nice. So we'll look forward to that. Dry conditions will continue, not even a smidgen of a percentage of a chance of precipitation. None. Grass pollen remains very high. Air quality index remains at 11 parts per million, which is good. And the UV index for the daytime UV remains very high at 9, which it has for weeks and weeks and weeks. Pressure is at 29.93 inches. Visibility is up to 10 miles. And that relative humidity is 70% and will fall even further. Indeed. All right. Weather from around the world is brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. Okay. The fellow just outside of London is registering 77 degrees and sunny. Paris is 84 degrees and sunny. How lovely. Rome is 82 and partly cloudy with a weather advisory for thunderstorms. Kiev is 77 and fair. Kabul is 81 and mostly cloudy. Hong Kong is 80 degrees and clear. Tokyo is 80 degrees, partly cloudy, with a weather advisory for thunderstorm activity. Sydney, Australia is 56 degrees with rain. San Francisco, California is 54 and cloudy, and they again have a small craft advisory for winds on the bay and offshore. And New York is 72 degrees Fahrenheit and cloudy. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property. And these people positively live around the world. first offering here at the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Smothered Benedict Wednesdays, is out of Reuters with Renee Maltzou doing the reporting. Greece wants the Parthenon Marbles back from the British Museum. Prime Minister Alexis Tsipras said in London on Tuesday, trying to reinvigorate a long-standing campaign for the 25-year-old treasures. British diplomat Lord Elgin removed the sculptures from the Acropolis. From the Apocalypse. Yeah, it was the Apocalypse, but we're talking about the Acropolis. In Athens in the early 19th century when Greece was under Ottoman rule. They comprise roughly half of the 160-meter-long frieze that was on the Parthenon Temple. Since independence in 1892, Greece has repeatedly requested their return without success. Tsipras, who was on his first official visit to London since he was elected in 2015, said the issue is of particular ethical importance for Greeks, and he raised the matter when he met his British counterpart, Theresa May. The marbles belong to the World Cultural Heritage, but their natural place is the Parthenon, he told reporters. Britain has resisted campaigns for the return of what it calls the Elgin marbles, along with treasures from other countries, including Nigeria and Ethiopia, often citing legislation that bans its museums from permanently disposing of their collections. Really? You know, the Falkland Islands aren't known as the Falkland Islands in Argentina, just so you know. Yeah. And Greece has stepped up its campaign since 2009 when it opened a new museum at the foot of the Acropolis Hill. Not the Apocalypse Hill. Okay, the Acropolis Hill. Saying this answered any suggestion that Athens lacks a suitable place to preserve the marbles. The museum hosts priceless relics from the Acropolis, including the caryatids, standing columns in female form. Oh, my. There is a space for one of the 6 missing figures on display in the British Museum, and they want it. They want to give up stuff. They want that final piece. In 2014, a previous Greek government hired a legal team, including human rights lawyer Amal Clooney, to advise on his bid to secure the return of the marbles. We know Britain's position, but what has a particular value is that this effort is continued, Tsipras said. In due course, we'll find increasingly more supporters of Greece's just stance.
Je te donne ce mon amour pour la vie entière. La promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle. C'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
Okay, finishing up here at the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy is another article out of Think Progress, this time by D. Parvaz. Nearly 50,000 people have been displaced since the Syrian government and its Russian allies escalated an offensive in the southern province of Dira last week, prompting concerns at the UN over where these displaced civilians have to run. Airstrikes, mortar shells, and barrel bombs have pounded the area, the AP reported Tuesday. The goal of the campaign seems to be regaining control of the town, as well as the border with Jordan. Jens Lerke, a spokesman for the UN Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs, otherwise known as OCHA, is worried that those fleeing the assault and moving closer to the border with Jordan will have nowhere to go. Jordan has sealed its border, insisting it will take no more Syrians as it already is hosting over 560,000 Syrian refugees, as well as more than 1 million additional unregistered displaced civilians fleeing the neighboring civil war. Jordan's foreign minister said that while there were currently displaced people at the border, the country would nonetheless remain sealed and that it was the responsibility of the UN to secure the displaced within Syria's borders. The amplified strikes, which started over the weekend, now of course the offensive started on June 18th, are in violation of a negotiated 2017 ceasefire that covered Dara and Quneitra. I'm sorry, I don't speak Syrian so well. While the United States issued a statement condemning the strikes, the AP reports that rebels in Syria were told not to expect an American intervention to defend them, because that's what we do. This is a mistake, said Suzanne Meriden, executive director of the Syrian American Council, a grassroots organization in support of U.S. intervention in Syria. The ceasefire has been broken by Russia, something that actually the U.S. brokered. And unfortunately, we're not saying anything about it, she told Think Progress. And now you have a heavily populated area, about 1 million people. And now the Assad regime has gone on this offensive against the people of Dara. And for the first time in a year, Assad is using barrel bombs again and all kind of other weapons, going crazy on this poor town. Not doing anything to meaningfully counter the violation of the ceasefire, said Meriden, means the U.S. will lose its standing before the international community as people who can broker deals and hold on to them. Now, Dara is geopolitically important, as it's close to the borders of Israel and Jordan. The town is also considered to be the heart of the revolution, said Meriden, as it was a launching ground for the protests that led to the uprising. Media focus might have shifted away from Syria in recent weeks, but, Meriden said, nothing has changed in Syria. Unfortunately, we're watching a massacre in the making. These internally displaced people are fleeing. They cannot be refugees because they cannot enter other countries. They're going to be ready to be killed because they have nowhere to run. They're going to be under fire, and we are going to see many more deaths, many more killed, many more maimed. In addition to fighting an airstrike from the Syrian government and its Russian supporters who are trying to force rebels out of the area, civilians have also been subjected to Israeli missiles. Well, how nice. At least 500,000 Syrians have been killed since the start of the fighting. And that was in 2011. That's not since 2011. That's just since this recent fighting here. And half the country's pre-war population of 23 million has been displaced within the country and elsewhere. Well, we better wake up. And I guess we're doing Putin's bidding anyway, aren't we? Okay, well, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period, but we will be back tomorrow for Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. Oh, yeah. And stay tuned to Networks Radio for breaking news as it happens. Oh, I totally missed whether the decision has come down on the SCOTUS decision on public unions, and we know where that's going. Bye. No more negotiations for you. And that's a sad predicament. But stay tuned for more breaking news on Networks Radio, and we will visit with you tomorrow in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théâtres, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. À fleurs sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma robe à fleurs sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum, 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 dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum, 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 dans mon jardin d'hiver.